Sergeant Marcus Cole stood at the observation window and watched the stars. He had been on Valen 7 station for 11 months now. 11 months of quiet duty. 11 months of learning to live alongside creatures that were not human. The Ithrani were beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt. They stood tall and thin, with hollow bones like earthbirds. Their skin was covered in soft feathers that changed color with their moods. Blue when they were calm, gold when they were happy, white when they were afraid. Their eyes were large and dark, like pools of black water that reflected everything they saw. Marcus had not wanted this assignment. He was a soldier. He had trained for war, for combat, for the hard and bloody work of keeping humanity safe in a galaxy that did not always welcome them. But the Galactic Council had decided that humans and Ithrani should learn to live together. They called it a cultural integration initiative. Marcus called it babysitting. The Ithrani were not fighters. Their bones broke easily. Their bodies were built for a world with weak gravity, where they could glide on warm winds and sing songs that echoed across crystal valleys. They were artists and poets and dreamers. They made music that could make a grown man weep without knowing why. But they could not defend themselves. Not really. Not against the things that lived in the dark spaces between stars. That was why Marcus was here. That was why a small team of human soldiers lived on Valen 7, watching over 300 Ithrani refugees who had fled their dying colony world. The humans were guards, protectors, shepherds watching over a flock that did not understand how dangerous the wolves could be. Marcus had grown to care for them, even though he had not planned to. There was something about the Ithrani that made you want to keep them safe. Maybe it was the way they looked at you with those big, dark eyes, full of trust and wonder. Maybe it was the way their children laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. Maybe it was simply that they were good, pure in a way that humans had forgotten how to be. The station administrator was named Vela. She was older than most Ithrani, her feathers touched with silver at the edges. She had lost her mate when their colony fell to a plague that swept through their crops. Now she led her people with quiet strength, making hard choices so that others would not have to. Marcus respected her. He had learned that strength did not always look like muscle and steel. Sometimes it looked like a mother who kept standing when the universe tried to knock her down. Vela had a daughter named Kira. She was 7 years old by human counting, though Ithrani measured time differently. Kira was small even for her kind, with feathers that shifted from purple to pink depending on her mood. She was curious about everything. She followed Marcus around the station, asking questions about Earth that he did not always know how to answer. What is an ocean? She had asked him yesterday. Is it true that water covers most of your world? How do you not drown? Marcus had tried to explain. He had told her about beaches and waves and the way salt water tasted on your lips. He had told her about fish that swam in great silver clouds and whales that sang songs almost as beautiful as Ithrani music. Kira had listened with her eyes wide and her feathers bright gold with happiness. Then she had shown him her collection. She kept it in a small box under her sleeping mat. Pebbles, smooth stones that she had gathered from every place. Her people had lived before coming to Valen 7. Some were red like rust. Some were green like moss. And 3 of them were blue. These ones came from a human trader, Kira had said, holding up the blue stones. He said they came from an ocean. From a place called Earth. Are they real? Did they really come from your world? Marcus had looked at those small blue pebbles and felt something twist in his chest. They were just rocks. Probably worthless. The trader had likely picked them up from any planet with blue minerals and told a story to make a sale. But Kira held them like they were precious beyond measure. Yeah, he had said. They're real. They come from a beach near where I grew up. The waves polished them smooth like that. It was a lie. A small one. But the way Kira's feathers had burst into brilliant gold made it worth it. Now, Marcus stood at the window and thought about that little girl and her pebbles. He thought about Vela and her quiet strength. He thought about all 300 Ithrani on this station, sleeping peacefully because they believed the humans would keep them safe. He hoped that belief was not misplaced. The alarm came at 3 in the morning. Station time. It screamed through the corridors like a wounded animal, red lights flashing in patterns that meant danger. Marcus was moving before he was fully awake. His training took over, his body responding to threat even as his mind caught up. He grabbed his rifle from beside his bunk, checked the charge, pulled on his boots without bothering to tie them. Other soldiers were doing the same, their faces grim in the red emergency light. Report. Marcus barked at the nearest console. The station AI answered in its calm, mechanical voice. Proximity alert. Hostile vessels detected. Classification. Kethver rating pack. Count, 20 individuals. Breach imminent in Eastern Hub. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Kethver. He had heard stories. Every soldier had heard stories. The Kethver were predators from the outer rim of the galaxy. They stood 8 feet tall on 6 legs, their bodies covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. They had too many teeth and not enough mercy. They did not attack for food or territory or resources. They attacked because they enjoyed it. They hunted for sport. They collected screams the way Kira collected pebbles, and they loved hunting Ithrani. The bird people screamed so beautifully when they died. How long until they breach? Marcus asked. Eastern Hub will be compromised in approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes. 4 minutes until 20 monsters poured into a station full of sleeping refugees who could not fight back. 4 minutes until everything Marcus had sworn to protect was torn apart. He looked at his squad. 5 soldiers, including himself. 5 humans against 20 Kethver. Get everyone to the emergency shelters, he ordered. Move fast. Do not stop for anything. Then Sergeant Marcus Cole started running toward the Eastern Hub, toward the monsters, toward whatever waited for him in the dark. The corridors of Valen 7 had turned into rivers of panic. Ithrani poured from their quarters, their feathers white with terror, their voices rising in high-pitched cries that hurt human ears. They moved fast on their thin legs, but they stumbled over each other, crashed into walls, fell and struggled to rise on bones that bent too easily. Marcus pushed against the current, fighting his way toward the Eastern Hub while everyone else fled in the opposite direction. He shouted orders as he went. Stay together. Keep moving. Do not stop. The emergency shelters are reinforced. You will be safe there. Just keep moving. He did not know if that last part was true. The shelters were built to withstand hull breaches and radiation leaks, not Kethver claws. But the Ithrani needed hope more than truth right now. They needed to believe that somewhere on this station, safety existed. 2 of his squad members were dead already. Marcus had found their bodies near the crew quarters, torn apart so badly he could barely recognize them. Rodriguez and Kim, good soldiers, better people. They had died trying to slow the Kethver advance, buying time for the evacuation with their lives. The remaining soldiers were scattered throughout the station, herding refugees toward the shelters like dogs herding sheep. Marcus had lost contact with most of them. The Kethver were jamming communications, flooding the frequencies with static that sounded almost like laughter. He was nearly to the Eastern Hub when he heard the child screaming. It cut through the chaos, like a blade, high and musical and filled with terror that no child should ever feel. Marcus knew that voice. He had heard it yesterday, asking about oceans and beaches and blue pebbles from a world she had never seen. Kira. He stopped running. The Eastern Hub was ahead of him, the sounds of the Kethver clear now. Heavy footsteps, clicking claws, low growls that vibrated in his chest like drums. Between him and the hub was a junction that led to the recreation wing, where Ithrani children played games and learned lessons and dreamed about futures that might never come. That was where the scream had come from. Marcus pulled up, the station map on his wrist display. The recreation wing was deep in the eastern section. The Kethver had already passed it, spreading through the corridors like poison through veins. Between Kira and the emergency shelters stood at least 20 monsters. His mind worked through the numbers. His training demanded cold calculation. 1 human soldier, standard combat rifle, 3 spare magazines, combat knife, light armor that might stop 1 claw strike but not 2. Against 20 Kethver, each one a perfect killing machine built by evolution to tear apart anything that lived. The math was simple. The math was clear. The math said he should keep moving toward the shelters, help the refugees he could actually save. Not throw his life away for 1 child he could not possibly reach. The math said Kira was already dead, but the math did not hear her screaming. Marcus changed direction and started running toward the recreation wing. He found the first Kethver at the junction. It was big, maybe 8 feet tall, covered in plates of natural armor that gleamed like wet stone in the emergency lights. It stood on 4 of its 6 legs, the other 2 raised and tipped with claws like curved swords. Its head swung toward Marcus, and he saw its eyes. Too many eyes. Small and black and hungry. Marcus did not slow down. He raised his rifle and fired 3 shots into the creature's face. The first 2 sparked off its armor. The third found the soft tissue around its eyes. The Kethver screamed and stumbled backward. He was past it before it could recover, running flat out through corridors that had become hunting grounds. He heard more Kethver behind him, drawn by the gunfire. Heard their clicking calls as they communicated with each other. Heard them start to follow. Good. Every monster chasing him was 1 monster not chasing refugees. Kira screamed again, closer now. Marcus followed the sound through a maze of corridors, past rooms where overturned furniture showed signs of panicked flight. He found bodies. Ithrani who had not made it to the shelters. He did not stop to look at them. He could not afford to. The recreation wing was at the end of a long hallway. The doors were open, and Marcus could see inside. Tables and chairs scattered like toys. A painting on the wall, made by Ithrani children, showing a garden under a purple sky. And behind an overturned table, a small shape huddled with wings pressed tight against her body. Between Marcus and that small shape stood 4 Kethver. They turned when they heard him coming. Their movements were fast, faster than something that big should be able to move. They spread out, blocking the corridor, their claws raised and their too many eyes fixed on this strange creature that had run toward them. Instead of away, Marcus did not stop running. He raised his rifle and fired as he ran. Shot after shot, aimed at eyes and joints and the soft places where armor did not cover. 1 Kethver fell with a scream. Another stumbled, its leg giving out beneath it. The other 2 charged. Marcus threw himself to the side, rolled, came up firing. A claw raked across his shoulder, cutting through armor and flesh. Pain exploded through him, hot and bright. He ignored it, kept moving, kept shooting. A Kethver loomed over him, its mouth open wide enough to swallow his head. He shoved his rifle into that mouth and pulled the trigger until the creature stopped moving. Then he was through them, stumbling into the recreation wing, blood running down his arm and dripping from his fingers. Behind him, he could hear more Kethver coming, the ones he had passed in the corridors, the ones that had been hunting through other parts of the station. They were converging on his position now, drawn by the noise and the smell of blood. He looked at Kira. She stared back at him with eyes like dark mirrors. Her feathers pure white, her small body shaking so hard he could hear her bones rattling. She recognized him. He saw recognition cut through terror. "Ocean Man," she whispered. Marcus checked his rifle. Half a magazine left. 3 spares. His shoulder was bad, but his arms still worked. The corridor behind him was filling with shadows. 20 monsters, minus the few he had killed. Maybe 16 left. Maybe more. He was not going to make it out of this room. But maybe, just maybe, he could make sure Kira did. Marcus moved to stand between the little girl and the door. He set his feet, raised his rifle, and waited for the monsters to come. The first HFY came through the door like a nightmare made real. It was bigger than the others Marcus had fought, its armor thick with scars from old battles. A leader, maybe, an alpha. It moved with the confidence of a creature that had never met anything it could not kill. Marcus shot it in the throat. The creature stumbled, dark blood spraying from the wound. Marcus shot it again, and again, and then again, until it fell and did not rise. Behind it, more shapes filled the doorway. Eyes glittered in the darkness. Claws clicked against the floor. Like rain on a metal roof. They rushed him all at once. Marcus had been a soldier for 12 years. He had fought in 3 wars and a dozen smaller conflicts. He had been shot, stabbed, burned, and left for dead on worlds whose names he could barely remember. But he had never fought like this. This was not combat. This was not war. This was something older and more primal. This was survival. He fired until his magazine ran empty, then slammed in another and kept firing. The rifle grew hot in his hands. The barrel started to glow. He did not care. Every shot that found its target was one more second of life for the little girl behind him. A HFY got past his fire and slammed into him. Marcus went down hard, the creature's weight crushing the air from his lungs. Claws raked across his chest, shredding armor and flesh. He felt ribs crack, felt blood fill his mouth. He grabbed his combat knife and drove it into the creature's eye, twisted, pulled it out, and stabbed again. The HFY screamed and thrashed. Marcus held on. He had learned long ago that the only way to survive a fight with something bigger than you was to get close and stay close. Too close for it to use its size against you. Too close for it to escape. The creature died with his knife in its brain. Marcus shoved the body aside and staggered to his feet. His chest was on fire. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. But he was still standing. He was still between Kira and the monsters. 3 more HFY charged through the door. Marcus met them with his knife in one hand and his rifle in the other. He had stopped thinking now. His body moved on instinct, on training burned so deep into his muscles that it bypassed his brain entirely. Duck, slash, fire, roll. Every movement bought. Another heartbeat of time. A claw caught his thigh and opened it to the bone. Marcus stumbled, but did not fall. He put 3 rounds into the HFY's face and kept moving. Blood poured down his leg, filling his boot. He could feel himself growing weaker, feel his movements slowing. But he would not stop, could not stop, not while she was still alive behind him. The HFY began to hesitate. Marcus saw it in the way they moved. The confidence was fading from their eyes. They had expected easy prey. They had expected screaming and running and the sweet thrill of the hunt. They had not expected this. They had not expected a human. The galaxy knew about humans, of course. Soft creatures from a small world. No claws, no armor, no natural weapons worth mentioning. They should have been prey like all the others. Easy meat for any predator smart enough to find them. But something was wrong with humans. Something was broken inside them. They did not fight like prey. They did not even fight like predators. They fought like something else entirely. Something that had decided death was acceptable. Something that had made peace with its own ending and now wanted only to take as many enemies with it as possible. The HFY had a word for creatures like this. It translated roughly as the already dead. They were the most dangerous things in the universe, because you could not threaten them. You could not scare them. You could not make them run. They were already gone. They just had not stopped moving yet. Marcus Cole had become one of the already dead the moment he heard Kira scream. He fought through the doorway and into the corridor beyond. He did not try to defend anymore. He attacked. He pushed forward into the massive HFY, his knife flashing, his rifle firing, his voice rising in a wordless scream that sounded nothing like a human. They tried to retreat. He did not let them. He killed them in the corridor. He killed them in the junction beyond. He killed them in the hallways they had used to enter the station, stepping over the bodies of his fallen squad members without slowing down. His rifle ran empty, and he used it as a club. His knife broke off in a HFY's chest, and he grabbed a fallen claw and used that instead. Blood covered him. Most of it was not his. He could not feel his legs anymore. Could not feel much of anything except a burning determination that refused to fade. Kira was behind him. Kira was still alive. As long as that was true, he would keep moving. The last HFY tried to run Dodd. It was smaller than the others. Maybe young, maybe just smart enough to recognize death when it saw it coming. It turned and fled down the corridor, its 6 legs carrying it fast toward the breach in the station hall. Marcus picked up a fallen rifle. Checked the charge. Aish. 1 shot left. He took careful aim and fired. The HFY fell and did not rise. 20 monsters. 20 bodies on the floor, and 1 human still standing in the middle of them, swaying like a tree in a storm, covered in blood and holding a broken weapon in hands that would not stop shaking. Marcus turned and looked back down the corridor. He could see the recreation wing from here. Could see the overturned table where a little girl was hiding. He took a step toward her. Then another. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. "Kira," he called, and his voice came out wrong, wet, bubbling. "Kira, you can come out now. The monsters are gone." He heard movement. Saw a small shape rise from behind the table, feathers still white but eyes filled with something that might have been hope. Marcus smiled. It hurt to smile. Everything hurt. But he smiled anyway. "Come on," he said. "Let us go find your mother." Kira did not move at first. She stayed behind the overturned table, her dark eyes fixed on the human who stood swaying in the doorway. He did not look like the same man who had told her about oceans. That man had been tall and strong and solid like the walls of the station. This man looked like something that should have fallen down a long time ago, but had forgotten how blood covered him from head to foot. Some of it was red like human blood. Some of it was darker, almost black. His uniform was torn in so many places that she could see the wounds underneath. Deep cuts that showed muscle and bone. His left arm hung at a strange angle. His right leg dragged behind him when he moved, but he was smiling. Despite everything, he was smiling at her. "It is okay," Marcus said. His voice sounded strange, wet and thick, like he was talking through water. "They are gone. All of them. You are safe now." Kira rose slowly from her hiding place. Her legs shook so badly that she almost fell twice. The recreation wing was destroyed around her. Tables and chairs thrown everywhere. The painting she had helped make, the one with the garden under the purple sky, was torn down the middle. And there were bodies. HFY bodies. More than she could count. She had to step over one to reach Marcus. It was still twitching, its too many eyes staring at nothing. She jumped over it with a small cry and ran the rest of the way. Marcus caught her. It must have hurt him badly because she heard him grunt with pain. But he caught her anyway and held her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart beating. Too fast, too weak. Like a bird trying to escape a cage. "You came back," she whispered into his torn uniform. "You came back for me." "Of course I did." His hand found the back of her head, his fingers gentle, despite the blood that covered them. "I still owe you a story about the whales. Remember? The ones that sing songs." Kira remembered. She remembered everything about yesterday. The pebbles from Earth. The stories about water that covered a whole world. The way Marcus had smiled when she showed him her collection. It felt like 100 years ago. "Can we go find my mother now?" she asked. "Yes, we can do that." Marcus tried to walk and nearly fell. Kira grabbed his hand and steadied him, though she was so small that she could not have held his weight if he truly went down. But the gesture seemed to help. He took a deep breath, straightened up as much as he could, and started moving down the corridor. The walk to the emergency shelters should have taken 5 minutes. It took almost 30. Marcus moved slowly, stopping often to lean against walls and catch his breath. Sometimes he coughed and blood came out. Sometimes his eyes went distant and unfocused, and Kira had to tug on his hand to bring him back. She talked to fill the silence. She told him about her pebble collection. Told him about every stone she owned and where it came from. The red ones from the mountains of her first home. The green ones from a river that had dried up before she was born. The purple ones that her father had given her before he died. And the blue ones. The ocean stones. She told him about how she kept them separate from the others. How she looked at them every night before she slept and tried to imagine what an ocean must look like. Marcus listened. He nodded and made small sounds to show he was paying attention. Kira did not know if he actually heard her words or if he was just holding on to the sound of her voice, like a rope that kept him from drowning. Either way, she kept talking. They passed more bodies. Kethfer mostly, but some Ithrani too. Kira looked away from those. She did not want to see their faces. Did not want to know if they were people she had known. "Almost there," Marcus said when they reached the junction that led to the shelter sector. His voice was weaker now, barely louder than a whisper. "Just a little further." Kira looked up at him. His face was very pale beneath the blood. His eyes were glassy. She had seen animals look like this when they were dying. Her father had looked like this at the end, when the plague had taken everything from him except the shell of his body. "You should sit down," she said. "You need help. After." Marcus shook his head slowly. "After I get you to your mother. Then I can rest." They kept walking. The emergency shelter doors were thick and heavy, designed to seal out the vacuum of space if the station hull was breached. They stood closed and solid at the end of the corridor. Behind them, Kira could hear sounds. Ithrani voices, crying, praying. The chaos of hundreds of refugees, crammed into a space built for maybe half that many. Marcus reached the doors and stopped. He swayed for a moment, then reached out and pressed his palm against the scanner. "Sergeant Marcus Cole," he said. His voice cracked on the words. "Human military. Requesting entry. I have a survivor." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a click. A hiss. The doors began to slide open. Light poured out. Not the red emergency light that filled the rest of the station, but white light. Normal light. Safe light. Kira squinted against it after so long in the darkness. She heard gasps. Cries of shock. She could only imagine what they saw. A human soldier covered in blood and wounds that should have killed him, standing in the doorway with an Ithrani child in his arms. Marcus took one step forward, then another. He walked into the shelter like a man walking through a dream. His eyes searching the crowd. Kira saw her mother, Vela stood near the front of the crowd, her feathers white with terror, her dark eyes wide and wet with tears. She had been crying, probably since the alarms first started. Probably since she realized her daughter was not among the refugees who had made it to safety. "Mama!" Kira called out. Vela made a sound that was not a word. She pushed through the crowd, shoving people aside, moving faster than Kira had ever seen her move. She crossed the distance in heartbeats and fell to her knees in front of Marcus, her hands reaching out to touch her daughter's face. Marcus placed Kira gently into her mother's arms. His movements were careful, tender, like he was handling something precious beyond measure. "She is okay," he said. His voice was very faint now. "She is perfect. She told me about pebbles. Blue ones. From the ocean." Vela looked up at him. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Her feathers were shifting, cycling through colors too fast to follow. White to blue to gold to something Kira had never seen before. Something that had no name. Marcus smiled one last time. Then his legs gave out and he crumpled to the floor. The shelter fell silent when Marcus hit the ground. 300 Ithrani watched as the human soldier collapsed, his body finally giving up the fight it had been losing since he first charged into the eastern hub. Blood pooled beneath him on the clean white floor. His breathing was shallow, wrong. The sound of lungs that were filling with fluid. Vela did not let go of her daughter. She held Kira against her chest with one arm while her other hand reached down to touch Marcus's face. Her fingers left trails through the blood that covered him. She found his cheek, found skin that was growing cold. "Help him," she said. Her voice was steady, the voice of a leader who had made hard choices all her life. Someone help him now. Ithrani medics rushed forward. They were not trained to treat humans. Their medicines were designed for hollow bones and feathered skin and hearts that beat twice as fast as human hearts. But they tried anyway. They knelt beside Marcus and pressed bandages against wounds that kept bleeding. They called for human supplies, for anything that might save a species they barely understood. Kira watched from her mother's arms. She could not look away. The man who had walked through 20 monsters to save her was dying on the floor. She could see it happening, could see the light fading from his eyes as the medics worked. "He came back for me," she said. Her voice was small, lost. He did not have to. He could have run away. But he came back. Vela did not answer. She was still touching Marcus's face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. Her feathers had settled into a color Kira had never seen before. Not white fear. Not gold happiness. Something deeper. Something older. A color that spoke of grief and gratitude and love all mixed together into an emotion that had no name in any language. The medics were talking fast. Human heart rate dropping. Blood pressure critical. Organ failure beginning. They needed human doctors. Human medicine. Human blood. Things they did not have and could not get in time. Marcus opened his eyes. They were glassy and distant. But they found Vela's face, found Kira's face behind her. A small smile crossed his bloody lips. "She has pebbles," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Blue ones. From the ocean." Vela's hand pressed tighter against his cheek. A sound escaped her throat. Not words. Something older than words. A keening that rose from somewhere deep inside her and spilled out into the shelter like water from a broken dam. It was a wail. But it was not a wail of grief. Not yet. It was something else. Something that the Ithrani understood in their bones, but had no way to explain to others. It was the sound a mother makes when she realizes her child is alive. When she had spent long minutes believing her daughter was dead, eaten by monsters, lost forever. When she had felt her heart break and her soul shatter, and then suddenly, impossibly, her child was placed back in her arms by hands covered in the blood of the creatures that should have killed her. It was gratitude, pure and overwhelming. Gratitude so deep and so powerful that it could not be contained by language. It had to escape in sound, in music, in a cry that came from the same place as birth and death and everything that mattered in between. The other Ithrani heard it. They understood, and one by one they added their voices to hers. The sound grew. 300 Ithrani, crying out in harmonics that human ears could barely process. The shelter filled with music that was not quite music. A song that was not quite a song. It resonated in the walls and the floor and the air itself. It vibrated in Kira's chest and made her heart beat faster. Thank you. That was what the sound meant. Thank you for my daughter. Thank you for my sister's son. Thank you for my neighbor's children. Thank you for walking into darkness when you did not have to. Thank you for bleeding when you could have run. Thank you for being what you are. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The sound washed over Marcus like a wave. He had held himself together through the fighting. He had ignored the pain and the fear and the absolute certainty that he was going to die. He had pushed past every limit his body had, and then pushed further still. He had been strong because Kira needed him to be strong, because the mission was not finished until she was safe. But now she was safe. Now she was in her mother's arms. Now the mission was complete, and this sound, this impossible, beautiful, heartbreaking sound, it broke through every wall he had built around himself. It found the places inside him that he had locked away years ago, places where doubt lived, places where he wondered if anything he did really mattered, places where he asked himself why he kept fighting when the universe seemed so determined to prove that goodness always lost. This sound answered those questions. This sound said, "You matter. What you did matters. You walked through hell and came out the other side carrying a child. And that child has a mother who will never forget what you did for as long as she lives. That child has a future now. She will grow up and live and love and maybe have children of her own someday. And all of that exists because you chose to run toward the monsters instead of away." Marcus felt tears rolling down his face. They mixed with the blood in the dirt and the sweat. He did not try to stop them. He could not have stopped them if he tried. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he wept. The medics kept working. Reinforcements finally arrived. Human soldiers burst into the shelter with medical supplies and doctors who knew how to treat their own kind. They pushed through the crowd and took over from the Ithrani medics. They stabilized Marcus's breathing, stopped the worst of the bleeding, started pumping blood and fluids into his broken body. He survived. It took months of recovery, multiple surgeries, more blood transfusions than the doctors wanted to count. There were times when they thought they would lose him, times when his heart stopped and they had to shock it back to life. But Marcus Cole was stubborn. He had always been stubborn, and some part of him refused to die before he could see Kira again. The Galactic Council gave him medals. They wrote reports about his actions. They studied his fight against the Kethver and tried to understand how one human had done what he did. Military experts gave lectures about his tactics. Scientists studied his biology looking for explanations. Politicians used his story in speeches about human-alien cooperation. None of that mattered to Marcus. What mattered was the day they finally released him from the medical bay. He walked slowly down the corridor, still healing, still weak. And at the end of the corridor stood a small Ithrani girl with feathers that shifted from purple to pink. She was holding pebble, blue, smooth, polished, by waves that Marcus had never actually seen. I saved it for you, Kira said. The ocean stone. I want you to have it. Marcus knelt down slowly. His body protested the movement. He ignored it. That is from your collection, he said. I cannot take that. Yes, you can. Kira pressed the stone into his palm. Her small fingers closed as around it. You gave me a story about whales and oceans. This is a thank you. For that and for the other thing. The other thing. 20 monsters dead on a station floor. A corridor painted with blood. A man who should have died, but kept walking because a little girl needed him. Marcus looked at the pebble in his hand. It was just a rock. Probably worthless. Probably not even from Earth, but it was the most precious thing anyone had ever given him. Thank you, he said. His voice cracked. Thank you, Kira. She smiled at him. Gold feathers caught the light. Thank you, Ocean Man. Years later, when Kira became the first Ithrani ambassador to Earth, she kept a pebble on her desk. It was not the same one she had given Marcus. That one was buried with him when he finally passed away, an old man surrounded by people who loved him. This pebble was new, blue, smooth, actually from a real ocean this time. When visitors asked about it, she told them the story. She told them about a night when monsters came and a human ran toward them instead of away. She told them about a walk through bloody corridors and a little girl talking about pebbles to keep a dying man alive. She told them about her mother's wail and what it meant. And at the end of the story, she always said the same thing. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the fastest or the smartest or the most advanced. But they have something that no other species has. They will walk through fire for people they barely know. They will die for strangers. They will face monsters for a child they met yesterday. She would pick up the pebble then, hold it up to the light. This is why the monsters fear them. Not because humans are dangerous, but because humans care. And caring, in a universe full of things that do not, is the most terrifying weapon of all.